Hello, everyone. This is Philosophy of the People with Ben Burgess and Stefan Bertram, and we will be discussing the works of the evil Ben Shapiro, on Marx and his theory of value. Look, everyone, Ben's back. It's probably not particularly impressive to anyone here who actually watches the channel, but it's impressive to me because I haven't seen Ben in a while.
Yeah, at this point, this is officially a guest appearance. No, it's been doing a very bad job of juggling time commitments lately, and about to go right back to that. But I figured this one is a little bit too, I don't know. It's a little bit too fun not to do one of these about. So this is. And also, I'm actually not going anywhere this weekend. So
I can see that this is a new room you're in. New to me, anyway.
Yeah. No, I think this might actually be the first philosophy stream I've done from this room. So this is the new apartment in Rosarito. I moved in here not that long ago, a couple months ago. So, but yeah. In any case,
did the enormous fern come with the house? The fern poster, painting, sculpture behind it.
Yes, the fern painting did indeed come with the apartment.
You haven't carried that for thousands of miles with you wherever you go.
I do not know. It's like, look, you always have to make hard decisions when you move. What to bring, what to leave. What to do with the stuff you're going to leave. It's like whatever else I have to like leave behind or get to Goodwill. The fern poster stays.
I was impressed that Ben Shapiro wasn't just kind of taking on Marx without reading him, but was specifically trying to do Marx's theory of value. Because I think when like Jordan Peterson tried to do it, for instance, he was much more kind of general and non-specific, like being so incredibly vague. I mean, I guess that's Peterson's like great skill in being so like excessively vague. You're not even sure what bit of Marx is allegedly talking about. While Ben Shapiro is making clear, explicit, short, straightforward claims about specific things that Marx didn't say, which, is probably quite beneficial for us.
Yeah, no, exactly. This is, I was just looking at the essay on Peterson, because I did the same thing when Jordan Peterson's book, like his new book came out, which is to say, I didn't read, I didn't read the whole book, right? But I did read the section on Marx to see what he said about him, and wrote something about it, which is what I did in the Shapiro case. In fact, when Matt McManus posted originally, like he posted like the cover of the Shapiro book, it said "Dive it in." I made fun of him on Twitter for I'd said, you don't have to do this to yourself.
Right, I actually saw that tweet.
And
now you're doing it, and you've got me to do it too.
Yeah, then Matt posted a picture of the page where Peterson talks about Marx. I was like, okay, it's Godfather, Godfather Part 3, right? Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. So yeah, I did in fact track down a copy and to make sure I wasn't missing any context, I read all the Marx stuff in it, and yeah, it is indeed just as bad as it looks, and in a certain way, as you say, there is a sense in which there's something that's more admirable about it than Jordan Peterson, because Jordan Peterson, does what Jordan Peterson does in that passage in his most recent book, Wrestling with God, which is to say that he sounds pretty angry, but like it's not entirely clear what he's saying. And whereas Ben Shapiro is really admirably clear. He's just completely like, there's no room for ambiguity whatsoever about what he's saying. Which, of course, one of the reasons that, it's a good making property. It's an admirable thing to write that way. is that it makes
You can clearly be like, oh, that's wrong.
it makes it much easier to see what's wrong with it. That's
Do you think his text would accidentally work better as a critique against like Proudhon?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it'd be closer, right? I mean, I will say Proudhon definitely does not have that virtue. I've read at least the part of the philosophy of misery that's like easily available in English translation, and the man kind of writes like a parody of a French philosopher. It's it's often a little tricky to figure out what Proudhon is saying, but definitely what Marx got out of what Proudhon is saying is actually in certain respects is closer to what Shapiro is describing Marx as saying. In other words, like I actually I think that my read on the two targets of what Marx is doing and the sort of core argument about exploitation and capital is that one of the targets, of course, are like bourgeois economists who love capitalism, but the other target that's a little bit less obvious, but he does make it explicit here and there, in footnotes and stuff, is people like Proudhon, right? That like people he sees as like flawed critics of capitalism who don't understand the sort of respect in which capitalism is exploitative and think it has something to do with unequal exchange. And I actually think a big part of Marx's point in his argument about exploitation is that the sort of core dynamics that make capitalism a class society, a society based on domination, exploitation, would be the same. You could make all the basic arguments about it while just assuming, for the sake of argument, that absolutely everything is being bought and sold at its value, right? So you don't have to make any kind of assumption about unequal exchange, right? I mean, this is I think this is really important to Marx, whereas Ben Shapiro thinks that Marx only cares about that, I guess, right? So I just to
list. Do you want to painfully quote the Ben Shapiro, and I'll laugh behind my hand?
Lest anybody suspect that I'm strawmanning here, he says, here's the quote, right? Marx heavily relied on the labor theory of value, and I just want to pause there because this is the only sentence that has the word Marx in it that's like even like plausibly correct, right? That there's like that you can like make a case that it's true, right? They like it depends what you mean a little bit or whatever, but it's like that's the one, right? So Marx heavily relied on the labor theory of value. He posited that if you could calculate the value of anything objectively, then anything beyond that value had to be a surplus, an unnecessary bit of profiteering added by the person selling a good, product, or service. So if the labor value of a potato was, say, $2, the labor put into growing the potato, harvesting it, and selling it to the grocer, and the grocer sold it for $3 to an end customer, the grocer was adding on an unfair surcharge of $1, thus increasing the price falsely so as to extract profit. Marx said the world would be made fairer and better by preventing the grocer from extracting profit, thus lowering the prices and making potatoes more affordable. The grocer was actually exploiting his customers when he earned a profit. The answer, said Marx, was to set prices from the top down. Simply set the price of potatoes at $2, remove the grocer's evil profit, and make everything more plentiful and cheaper. Now, there are a few paragraphs after that of refutation of what Shapiro has just said, Marx said, but what I just read is the full characterization of Marx's view.
Sorry, I just distracted myself because I was going to link the article in the chat, which I'll do now, but I realized I was on our fake copy. Sorry, I've actually just thrown myself and thrown you by throwing myself. There, successfully posted it.
All right. So yeah, that's the full description that Shapiro gives of what Marx thinks is what I just read. So like I guess not to, belabor the point too much. I mean, in the in the essay, I talk about how we all, of course, remember the title of Capital, right? If you open up to the title page here, it's Capital: A Critique of Political Economy, and more importantly, an argument for price controls. I think that's what that says.
Can you search in the index for evil, please? I think that came up quite a lot.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's the sort of he's got sometimes Marx will do like 100-page chapters, so there's probably one like that on why grocers are evil.
Right, and the next one is like why shoemakers are evil and blah 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 blah.
Yeah, I mean we yeah, no, which is actually maybe worth belaboring a little bit, that that Marx actually says in one of the prefaces. He's got this phrase like, God, let me see if I can really can really quickly find it. So anyway, I'm not gonna find it on the fly while we're talking, but Marx actually has a line in one of the premises where he says, just quoting from memory, I might be getting this slightly wrong, but he says something like, "Look, when is that? Sorry, I got sucked in once again to believe.
You need to find the real quote, guys.
Could actually find it. So he says exchange. Yeah. So yeah. But anyway, I'm not going to find it.
I thought you found it.
I'm going to stop. No, I need to stop looking because this is like horrible TV, But
Ben's just going to mumble the whole of Capital out to everyone.
Yeah, no, exactly. Why not? Yeah, he says. Actually,
no, don't go back.
Yeah. So, he says something in here about how, like I've by no means represented capitalists and landlords in a rosy light in these pages, right? But there can be no point of view from which the problem is less these people's, individual moral character. That's obviously not the exact phrase he uses, but it's like something along those lines than mine, right? Like that they have a like in other words, he says something like, the gist of the quote, right, is that it's like, yeah, look, capitalists and landowners don't come off looking good in this, but actually there's no point of view from which it's like less a matter of the individual evil of these people than the one that I'm propounding in Capital, right? I mean, that's
right, because if there's some way in which Marx is kind of rosy about capitalism in Capital, it's that he portrays the capitalist system as like,
oh my God, I finally found it.
As actually functioning as like a functional laissez-faire economy.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. Which I definitely want to get to, but yeah, he says, okay, so here's the quote. I actually finally found it. It finally occurred to me to search with the word rosy. To prevent possible misunderstandings, let me say this: I do not by any means depict the capitalist and the landowner in rosy colors, but individuals are dealt with here only insofar as they're personifications of economic categories, the bearers of particular class relations and interests. My standpoint from which the development of the economic formation of society is viewed as a process of natural history, right? Historical materialism, in other words, can less than any other make the individual responsible for relations whose creature he remains, socially speaking, however much he may subjectively raise himself above them, right? In other words, this is, in his materialist understanding of what's going on here, the fact, I mean, look, there are in fact several places that you could probably think of without too much difficulty at Capital, where he, strongly suggests that that various capitalists and landowners are in fact horrible people, right? And really expresses all kinds of contempt for them. But like, I think he's right to say here in the preface that's like, look, this is not the main thing going on here. Right? This is all a little sideways to the main argument, right? Which is that the problem is with the structural incentives that people have because of their class position. There's no, I mean, even to the extent that like these people are bad people, it's just because that's what the system selects for. I mean, if that like you'd get, if you don't have if you don't have enough ice in your veins to do what needs to be done, then you'll just be outcompeted by somebody who can, right? That's the whole point, right? So yeah, I mean, I think this business in the quote about the evil, the grocer's evil profit is probably a bit misleading for the reason you suggest. But I also don't think that's like one of the top 10 things that's wrong with this. This description, right? This is
maybe there is an evil grocer in Capital somewhere. There's certainly evil like owners of textile weaving places. I remember that one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and landowners certainly, right? There's the Duchess of Sutherland, clearing out her estate. There's there's some like people who are like violating. There's some like Quaker business owners who are violating, child labor laws that he has some yeah, there are like a fair number of people who certainly portrays as being like deeply awful people.
The textile thing I remember was some owner who was making their employees in a textile whatever, like a clothes manufacturing place, to be clear, like a secondary textile manufacturing, was making people work in conditions where there was insufficient air for everyone, which seems like completely such an absurdly like evil thing that it kind of boggles the mind. It presumably has something to do with the material conditions of renting space in London at the time cost a lot of money, but it seems just absurdly ridiculous to us now.
Yeah, right. Like, and there's certainly a fair amount of stuff that, like, whether like however much you blame the individuals who are carrying it out, which is consistent, by the way. I mean, like you can, you can think that the structural incentives are the heart of the problem, but like also blame the people who play that role. I mean, like if you're, I don't know, if you're working for, you're in like, I don't know, like if you work in the fingernail pulling squad of the Cairo secret police, right? Then like it probably is true that if you quit your job, somebody else would take it.
Yeah.
Right. But nevertheless, I don't think that really gets you off the hook for the fact that you're doing something.
Even if you're really bad at pulling fingernails.
Yeah, even if perhaps the other person would actually be better at it, right?
Yeah.
They'd extract more confessions. There is still something seriously wrong with your life choices. But yeah. So yeah, putting aside the that question, right? Like just the idea that the issue that Marx is focused on is markups is just really wild, right? I mean, this is like the stupid little joke I put in the that put in the essay is, we all remember, of course, the stirring concluding lines of the Communist Manifesto. Consumers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but this, prices of your pre-sale items and a world of bargains to win. Right? Like this is
so many boo-boos.
like, this is seriously insane, right?
Do you want to hear the only thing that Marx said about grocers?
What did he say?
Very often the beer seller or the grocer of the village is at the same time the letter of its house. In this case, the agricultural labor finds himself as a second master beside the farmer. But to be clear, this is in quotations.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even remember that. Like the closest I remembered, like the only thing I remembered in Capital that was, about about what was being done to people as consumers rather than as workers was the thing about the bread, right? That the half price bakers, would adulterate the bread with, what did he say? Like, the sawdust and, like the.
Do you remember the bit where he talks about how the working, like the very bottom of the working class is sold like fake tea?
I actually forgot about the fake tea. Maybe this is something that's more likely to stick in the memory of a British person.
Yeah, to me that was just like, wow, that's insane.
Yeah, but yeah, the sawdust bread, right? I certainly remember that, right? But of course, part of the reason these passages stand out is that this is the included some introductions and stuff, right? I mean, this runs to 900 and change pages, and there are like a couple of passages about what's like bad things that are done to people as consumers, right? And and it is really remarkable to me, just kind of in the Hall of Fame of unjustly popular pundits not bothering to do basic research. It's like there really is a special place for this. Like I think I might be wrong about this. I might have missed something somewhere, but I think I've read everything Jordan Peterson has written about Marx. This is much worse. Like, the Peterson stuff is bad, right? But like, this is worse. Like, this is something that I don't think that Ben Shapiro's impression of what Marx said would have survived contact with like a skim through the first few pages of the Wikipedia page for Capital Volume 1. I mean, it's not like, I think if he just Googled what was Marx's.
Yeah, it's very worse than the Google AI summary.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think if you just Googled what was Marxist labor theory of value and what did it have to do with exploitation, I feel 100% confident that the Google AI summary would have been much, much better than what he wrote. Right? I mean, like it's there's no way that the Google AI would have said this. Like I'm not even an AI booster, and I don't, I cannot imagine that it would have come up with this. Like, this is just literally, the man had like two data points in his head. One was that Marx had a theory of value that had something or other to do with labor. And two, that Marx said that there was something or other about capitalism that was exploitative. And I think that's literally it.
I've looked at the Google AI summary, and it just has one fantastically Marxian line it came up with, which is, imagine two commodities, a pair of shoes and a pair of pants. It would only be more Marxian if instead of saying a pair of shoes and a pair of pants, it gave an amount of linen and an amount of leather.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. It's I actually have never I've never written anything about Peter Singer's anti-Marxism. I'm supposed to, there's a book about Peter Singer that I'm supposed to review for Jacobin. I just haven't had a chance to read it yet. But Other than, but the only thing I've ever written about Peter Singer was the essay about Peter Singer's views on Palestine.
Hmm. Oh, we
So
did a good one on that. I think that was one where we made various jokes about hang gliders.
yes, indeed, yes, yeah. So just to remind the censorship algorithm if it's forgotten, but yes, yeah, no, totally.
It was I was also reading the Zombie Marx article that you linked.
Yep.
And that one was really, I quite like that. I mean, I don't know if it would be something interesting for you to write about because you probably already have. And second, you're kind of neutral on the topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. So, but yeah, but yeah, Mike Beggs is really good. He's a very like he's he's in the golden circle of academics who are very, very good um at writing for a popular audience without losing rigor. Um, but yeah, no, that's a great article. But anyway, no, I've not written anything about Peter Singer on Marx. I actually, it's been a very long time since I read Peter Singer on Marx. I remember reading a little bit of it, like probably literally decades ago, and kind of having what is this shit reaction to it, and sort of being frustrated and stopping. But I suppose
I think the only real like serious, like actually good. I think most of the time when we talk about critiques of Marx on here, it's like, and yeah, it was really bad and it missed the point and so on. I think the only one that we haven't done is when we had, was he called Thibault? Like when we brought him on.
yeah, Tibor, yeah.
Thibault.
No, yeah, no, exactly. Like the Tibor, Tibor was good. Yeah, I mean, look, of course, if you're gonna, if you're in the business of writing about what like super prominent, super popular reactionaries say about Marx, which of course, you can legitimately question whether that's a good business to be in, but if you are, right, which, I think at least every now and again, because it's fun and because these people all have mega audiences. So I mean, it's it's good to counter what they put out there. But like, if you are in that business, then yeah, you're not going to be running into a lot of like challenging, interesting criticisms, right? I think that you're more likely to get challenging, interesting criticisms when you sort of at least descend the popularity level from like, the Petersons and Shapiros of the world to like quasi prominent libertarian philosophy professors and people like that, right? Like that's
Because
the
I was thinking that the only demented reactionary I can think of who's actually read Marx is the one that actually thinks he's a Marxist, which is Nick Land.
right. I don't have, you know, I got, I feel like around the time I started doing the sort of thing I do these days, I I was running into a lot of references to Nick Land, and I got curious enough to buy one of his books. And I don't think I ever read very much of it. Right? I think
Mm.
I've always been like I get this sort of like, I kind of sort of kind of understand what some of the like accelerations of stuff is. I have a like vague whiff that there's something horrifyingly reactionary going on there, but like my one attempt to like actually read some of it didn't didn't inspire confidence that the game was going to be worth the candle, and I never finished.
Yeah, he's a fun writer, but I don't know if there's really that much worth. Because obviously, and it would be difficult because I think he's just kind of on a different axis to like analytic Marxist philosophy, and that you might grab on and just not find much to hold on to.
Yeah, that seems right. uh I mean, which is funny because I think they're probably, I don't know, maybe I should try again. But
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes for a very fun show, but that doesn't necessarily make reading a whole book worthwhile.
no, maybe I will try again. It's very I mean, because like there are certainly people who I think probably are writing on the wavelength that he's on.
Yeah, I mean, in the context, because he's what? He's like 2 people away from the vice president of the United States.
Okay.
There's what's his face that you debated, right?
Oh, Curtis Yarvin. Okay.
Curtis Yarvin. I would go from Curtis Yarvin, vice president, Curtis Yarvin, Nick Land.
Yeah, I'm not going to start naming them all, but for better or for worse, this is
No,
not
it would be funny if Curtis Yarvin's like online Marxists, where he hasn't actually read Nick Land.
entirely possible. Yeah, no, I think as gross as I find this, I think I've I think the number of people I've had conversations with who've somehow had conversations with the current vice president is alarmingly large. Like, I mean,
Right, and the actual president's looking quite ill and decrepit.
yeah, I know, right? Like Amy Therese, who spent years obsessively posting about how awful I am, and for all I know, still does. I don't know. I blocked her like years ago, but
Called me an Antifa super soldier.
I remember
Negatively.
that. I remember that.
Pejoratively.
Pejoratively called you that, to be clear. Yeah. It kind of sounds cool, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember when she said that. So yeah, she actually had JD Vance on her podcast, and which I listened to a fair amount of that, and yeah, there are a fair number. But yeah, it's very weird thinking about the fact that the current vice president, quite possibly imminent president of the United States, has surely scrolled past, people saying on Twitter, he follows on Twitter, be like, oh, fucking Ben Burgess, That's not,
The Judeo Bolshevik.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's so yeah, no, but look, what I was going to say though is I think there are people whose substantive views are completely different from that, but who write at somewhat the same like wavelength, who I have enjoyed and thought I got something out of their work, the Mark Fishers of the world and whatnot, right? That's so. Maybe I should give Land another try. I saw on Twitter the other day there was this post about every leftist has their favorite reactionary writer. Who's yours? And I very boringly said Robert Nozick because that's the honest answer.
Yeah.
All right, interesting. I've certainly read more Michael Moorcock than Nick Land, but not lately.
Yeah, I mean, Moorcock also had much about politics.
Yeah, I mean, very, very, very true. Yes.
I guess also a very easy bar to jump over. So.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, back to Marx. I think that so to some extent, I mean, what I'm doing in the essay is using the occasion of Ben Shapiro coming out with this book where he has this insane description of what Marx thinks, just to sort of be like, here's what Marx actually says, and that's territory that you and I have certainly gone over before, but I think I think in broad strokes, Marx, Marx is making an argument that even if nobody is violating the law of exchange, right? So nobody is buying or selling anything for less than its value. Nobody's getting ripped off in the transaction by that standard. That it can still be the case that workers are exploited under capitalism in a way that's that is importantly parallel to pre-capitalist forms of exploitation. Like the analogy that he most commonly goes back to is feudalism, that the serf would, be forced to spend part of their time, working their lord's field instead of theirs, or whatever. If you had a form of feudalism where you had like a corn rent or whatever, right? You're rather than like just having separate fields, you at least had to like spend part of it, making the corn for the feudal lord. And the basic core of that argument is, okay, given the actual labor theory of value, which is not in fact the theory that the correct value, or the value or correct price of every commodity is whatever the final seller paid for it from the immediate producer. But what it actually says, right? And this is like a very, this is like a very boring sort of normie reading of Capital. Like I think there are people who get fixated on certain passages in chapter 1 about abstract labor and commodity fetishism, and spin things out that are much more esoteric than this. But I think that just sort of the most, boringly straightforward reading of the basic things that Marx says is that the value of every commodity is the average amount of socially necessary labor time that it takes to produce it, where the big wrinkle is once we abstract away from all the specifics of different concrete labor processes, right? So, like I was just going over this with the Capital class, the Capital Volume 1 class that I do on the Patreon yesterday. Tailoring and weaving are different concrete labor processes, but if we sort of abstract away from all those specifics, right, then we have abstract sort of generalized human labor, which Marx thinks is the common element in all the different commodities. That means that we can measure them all on a single scale, right? So once we've made that distinction, right, we're talking about abstract labor, then yeah, it's the average socially necessary labor time. And Marx actually spends a lot of time belaboring this in the first, like the second section, especially if the first chapter, that like, okay, if productivity goes up, so now it only takes X number of hours to make Y goods, then so now you're making like two times Y goods over the course of the working day. Then the total value product of the working day is still the same, because it still has a total value product of X number of hours, but now it's spread more thinly throughout the goods, so each individual good is more valuable, right? Like he really spends a lot of time on this stuff. And I will say, right, like there's a certain kind of Marxist who's very into saying, it's like, oh, well, Marx isn't thinking like an economist. He's thinking like a social theorist. And, he's not interested in this stuff about, prices, and all that. It's like, I mean, it's both, right? But I don't think he's uninterested in this stuff. He certainly spends a lot of time talking about it, right? But in any case, right, that's Marx's view. And because, the value of a product is the labor time it takes, abstract, average, socially necessary, all the caveats, right? But the value of a product is the labor time that it takes to produce it. That means that the commodity that workers are selling in the labor market, right, is their labor power, their capacity to work. That the value of that is the labor time it takes to produce that, which can sound very confusing, right? I mean, like, unless we're talking about like labor, like going into labor, like what kind of labor are we talking about that, is producing, the human being who's selling themselves there. But like what he means is he thinks the value, right, the labor time value of labor power is the labor time that it takes for the worker to continue to subsist, to reproduce himself for another day at a certain level of subsistence, whatever counts as making a living in the society that you're living in, which he says varies. It has a historical and moral element, and that reduces to the labor time that it takes to create the package of commodities that the worker needs to continue, reproduce themselves at that level of subsistence. And happily for the capitalist, the amount, the number of hours it takes to produce those goods that go into that package is less than the number of total hours in a working day. Hence, it is actually possible, after all, without violating the law of exchange, to have for labor power to be sold at its full value, and nevertheless, workers are being exploited in the sense that they're spending part of their day working for themselves, but like the feudal serf, they have to spend part of their time laboring to enrich the ruling class. And Marx, of course, thinks that they're forced to do this by the dull compulsion of economic necessity.
And their lovely double freedom.
Yeah, no, exactly right. Because they're doubly free, because they're legally free to move around and make contracts with any capitalist who will have them, but they're also free from any means of supporting themselves other than doing that, right? Which means that in effect they're forced to do so, right? And that's Marx's argument in Capital. And so Shapiro, after the part that we went over,
I was going to say, what you've said now, I think, makes Shapiro's example with the diamonds one of the most self-undermining examples that anyone's ever given.
Oh my God, yeah. So this is so what, like, Shapiro starts out, he has those paragraphs where he's like, oh, again, because he remembered something about a labor theory of value, though he didn't remember quite what it was. And he remembered something about exploitation, though apparently he didn't even remember who was supposed to be exploited or by who.
The grocers.
And he just kind of spun that into this description. It's like again, literally, I don't think would survive contact with a Google AI summary that you would get if you just asked it, what was Marx's labor theory of value and how does it relate to exploitation? And yeah, I mean, I think that to Tony's comment, right? I mean, so Marx starts out Capital by saying that the wealth of societies that are dominated by the capitalist mode of production take the form of an immense collection of commodities. So when he says wealth, he like wealth often in Capital means like use values, right? The like stuff, right? That but in one of the things that makes bourgeois society different from like feudal society or ancient Greek or Roman societies or whatnot is that it all is that the wealth amassed in this society, right, takes the form of commodities, right? And so this raises a question about what the value is of commodities, which Marx says all kinds of things about how, like, for 2,000 years people have been trying to figure it out, and he has and he says they weren't able to, and he's got this analogy about how people were able to like make observations about biology for thousands of years without knowing what cells were, but anyway, like, okay, so Shapiro has spun out this totally phantasmagoric like idea of what he thinks the labor theory of value is and how it relates to exploitation, just based on these two things that he vaguely remembers. Is like, I don't need to look it up, I'm good, right? And then he gives a refutation, and the refutation, to be fair, like this kind of the refutations where it starts to sound like he might have actually looked some stuff up, right? Because he says this, it turns out, is idiocy. The price of potatoes isn't set. There's nothing about a potato that makes $2. So far we have Yeah, so far he is that does connect pretty obviously to the description he just gave. But well, Tony, I would just say the wealth takes the form of these, right? So it's I don't think it's conflating it. I think it's that that remember, I mean, like what's one of the first things Marx says in the first chapter, right? The commodity itself has this physical nature, right? The use value, and also the exchange value reflected in its value, right? So the wealth and use value terms, right? Takes the form of something with exchange value reflecting labor time value. But in any case, he like so far he's just responding to a straw man, but then when he continues, or I mean, actually, sorry, that was unfair. I shouldn't say straw man. Straw man is what you do when you know that you're caricaturing something, right? You're
right, because a straw man's like in the form of a man.
Yeah, you're culpably presenting a caricature to like try to trick people. Ben Shapiro is just really, really confused, right? Doesn't rise to the level of a straw man. Like he just literally doesn't know. But he's responding to what he imagined or had a dream that Marx said or something. And then but then as he goes into detail, now he starts to sound like he actually did look something up, right? Because he's just sort of doing standard like marginalism stuff, right? So he says, there's nothing about potato that makes $2. Why? Because the preferences of human beings are fluid. The price of a good or service is only what we think it is, and that price can change over time as we decide individually what we prioritize. This becomes obvious when we consider, for example, a pearl you find on the beach. You have expended zero labor to cultivate the pearl. You simply stumbled onto a pearl, and it is worth far more than a potato somebody planted, cultivated, and then picked. Why? The labor theory of value cannot answer that simple question, right? So in order to answer that simple question, we have to reject the LTV and accept marginalism, where you say, okay, the use value is the only thing driving the exchange value, right? The like consumer preferences are the beginning and end of the explanation of value. And something I do try to get into in the essay is like I want to be really clear about this. I think that there are non-stupid reasons to be skeptical about the labor theory of value and to criticize it, right? I just don't think this is one of them, right? I mean, this is like I think there's an interest in debate that you can have about the labor theory of value, and then there's whatever's going on here, and again, like one of the first distinctions that Marx makes when he starts laying it out is that I mean, he says, look, we're talking about like not the labor time that it actually took to
any particular instant of whatever.
In any particular instance, right? Because he says like this is all in chapter 1, section 1, right? That if we're talking about any particular instance, then if like a worker is lazy or bad at their job, right, that makes what they produce more valuable, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So we're talking about the social average, right? What's the average amount that's socially necessary in a given time or place, right? So like which is obviously, again, I'm starting to feel redundant, but I'll just say it again. Shapiro obviously did not read the first section of the first chapter of the book, and because again, this distinction about averages, like socially necessary averages, is one of the very first ones that Marx makes, right? And he and so like if you're thinking about the Pearl example, and I really want to emphasize before I wrote this, if you were like, Ben, describe to me the economy of pearl manufacture, pearl finding, I would have drawn a blank, right? I spent literally 5 minutes looking some stuff up, which, I emphasize here because best-selling author Ben Shapiro did not bother to spend 5 minutes looking this stuff up, or whatever, maybe he just didn't see I was relevant because he doesn't know that Marx is talking about socially necessary averages. But it's the chances that you're going to be just walking around, you just happen to stumble on a jewelry quality pearl are like almost non-existent, right? It's like that's just a thing that does not happen, right? There is pearl hunting, right? Where you go, you search for natural pearls that might be up to that quality, but it's very difficult, right? It's incredibly time consuming, right? That because it's so rare that that you find one that's at that level, and which is why, by the way, pearl hunting, from what I understand from 5 minutes of looking this up, is still lingers on here and there, but is mostly out, no longer in practice, right?
If I was to guess, it would be very poor people around the Pacific doing it.
Yeah, sure, right. But by and large, most pearls that are sold in the world don't come from that, right? Because it's much easier to just do pearl cultivation farms. But then you look that up, and that's also really difficult and time consuming. No. Right? It's just much less difficult and time consuming than finding jewelry quality pearls that exist naturally, right? So it's still a huge pain in the ass, right? That's which, again, if we're saying this is this great strike against the labor theory of value, that assuming for the sake of argument that the price of pearls has something to do with its underlying value, that the labor theory of value can't explain the relationship there. It's again, since we're talking about the average case, not any particular freak instance, it's not at all clear to me that it can't, right? It seems like it can. It seems like it takes a tremendous amount of labor. In fact, in the first section of the first chapter of the first volume of Capital, this is 5 or 6 pages in, after you finish reading the last preface, right? It's 5 or 6 pages into the first chapter. Marx gives an example that's very closely parallel to this point about pearls, right? He says the same quantity of labor provides more metals in rich mines than in poor. Diamonds are a very rare occurrence on the Earth's surface, and hence their discovery costs on average a great deal of labor time. Consequently, much labor is represented in a small volume. With richer mines, the same quantity of labor would be embodied in more diamonds, their value would fall. If man succeeded without much labor in transforming carbon into diamonds, their value might fall below that of bricks. And yes, Tony Red points out, see, I didn't even think to look into this. I was too busy looking up pearl cultivation facts. But Tony points out in the chat that actually lab-grown diamonds have gotten good enough that it's been really bad for the price of diamonds, right?
It's literally what Marx said, right? We can now just squeeze carbon until we get diamonds.
Yeah, pretty much, right? So pretty much what Marx said in that passage has happened, right? In real life, or certainly is in the process of happening. So this would be pretty bad, right? If that were all that there was to it, right? That Shapiro gives an example, when Shapiro is trying to refute the labor theory of value, he gives an example that's really closely parallel to an example that Marx himself discusses within the first 5 or 6 pages of the beginning of the first chapter of Capital, right? I mean, this is just in the Hall of Fame of not doing your homework, right? I mean, this deserves some kind of mention, right? This book, Lions and Scavengers by Ben Shapiro, was like #1 in Amazon's political commentary and opinion category, when it came out.
What is the title about? Do you know?
What's that?
The title. Why is it that?
I think it's about like. I mean, I've only read the Marx and the Labor Theory of Value bit, but my sense is that the title, I think it's like the Mitt Romney thing about makers and takers, right? That
Yeah, you assume so. I guess the scarabs are bad.
Yeah, I guess, right.
If you know, answers in the chat or in the comments.
So yeah,
I can subscribe.
Like, yeah, it's like, oh, they're like real hustlers who are out there making it happen, and then people who just want to mooch, I guess, is the idea. But yeah, like this would be very bad if that were all that there was to it. But actually, a couple paragraphs later, this is like after Shapiro has stopped talking about the labor theory of value as such, and he's just transitioned to like enthusing about marginalism, about value. A couple paragraphs later, Shapiro himself brings up diamonds, right? He says, why is a diamond worth more than a glass of water, right? This is a classic marginalist still example. Obviously, water is vital to life. Without it, you die. A diamond isn't just non-valuable in most circumstances. It is definitionally useless. You wear it. Well, it's not definitionally, but that's not the biggest thing that's wrong here. So.
Right, like most diamonds used as jewelry as opposed to industrial stuff. Whatever, doesn't matter.
You wear it because it's beautiful, not because it adds utility to your life. And it's just like, oh, so this is pretty bad. You're literally doing the same example that the guy you just said was idiocy, right? It was purveying idiocy, like explicitly anticipates in response to in the opening pages of his book that you've never cracked open. That seems pretty bad to me. And I don't know. I mean, like kind of the sort of what it ultimately made me think was just like, okay, I don't want to do that thing too much that libs are always doing, where they're like, oh, the reactionaries of like a past generation were good, actually, right? It's just these like current ones that are bad, right? Because those guys were all terrible in many, many ways, right? But back then your equivalent was saying the same thing, right? So I don't want to fall into that trap too much. But I do have to say, like, I don't know, man. I feel like we used to have better reactionaries than this. Like, not like morally better, right? Like, I think like William F. Buckley, for example, was everybody like normatively was every bit as much of a piece of shit as Ben Shapiro, but like, but just like intellectually, I feel like we used to have a better class of like reaction, like of like the most famous reactionaries than this.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably part of a transition from like elite reactionary stuff to like populist reactionary stuff, right? Because like William F. Buckley or whatever was these kind of reactions in the mid 20th century were trying to appeal to like other people in elite circles to kind of get something done. Well, Ben Shapiro obviously kind of does that indirectly, but his main thing is like, I mean, he started out just on YouTube, like rage farming, basically. And then there's never going to be like any, it'd be very weird if that led to like him being like a great intellectual anyway.
Yeah. I mean, look, I personally would like to think you can do both, but Todd for YouTube stuff and also, and also make intellectually rigorous contributions. That's a core illusion I'm holding on to. But in any case, yeah, no, I get that, right? But like it does just seem like
I mean, it's weird that none of them have read Marx. Like none of them. You'd think one of them would.
Yeah, right. like
I guess it's not actually that much value add for them because there's not that many people like us, and ultimately probably the people that are reacting to them negatively in this way are just part of the ecosystem,
Yeah, no, I think that's probably right. I guess I do think, well, and I mean, maybe that goes to the larger point, right? That like we used to have smarter reactionaries, at least in part, because I think they were reacting to a much stronger version of the left, right?
Yeah.
Like Hayek and von Mises had to spend all this time making like elaborate arguments that socialist planning, couldn't work because like that was like a, like because like we had this like strong, confident socialist left that was like, that was like preparing to actually be in power and do stuff, right? And
We were trying to plan.
yeah, exactly, planning to plan. And whereas yeah, I mean, by and large, the Shapiros and Petersons mostly like, mostly the role of Marxism and socialism in their work is like as a bogeyman when they want to like beat up on liberals, right? I mean, that's the predominant thing. But which and I don't want to exaggerate the discontinuity too much. I think conflating liberals and radicals has been like a staple of conservative rhetoric since I don't even know Joseph de Maistre, right? I mean, it's like that's like they've kind of always done that, right, to some extent, right? But I don't know. I mean, I guess somebody like Buckley, right? It's like I get what you're saying. It's like it's not like Buckley cut his teeth, rage farming like videos of triggered libs, right? But he's somebody who, if somebody was going to be like try to think of a conservative pundit, right? For a long time in like the late 20th century, he would have been the first person that would have come to mind, right? Like he wrote best-selling books. He had a TV show where in his own laconic, genteel way, he did a lot of lib owning, right? He
I wasn't saying he was like unpopular or they wasn't appealing to the public, but just kind of the order of direction was reversed.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. But so it's like, well, maybe because of that, though, right? The difference is really striking because, like, I don't know. I mean, I try to read stuff like this from time to time, right? So I got like a few years ago, I read Buckley's book, God and Man at Yale. I think like a little while after it, I tried to read the Alan Bloom one, Closer to the American Mind, and I actually got a little sick of that, and I had to put that on hold because the like Alan Bloom is just like way too like he's just way too fired up by how horrifying he finds the Rolling Stones. It's a little ridiculous, but
yeah. Which now seems completely ridiculous.
But yeah, like God and Man at Yale is in its own way a very ridiculous book. Don't get me wrong. I mean, like the whole point of the book is that it's very openly and unabashedly a pro-censorship book, right? So
you ever complain about the Beatles?
Yeah, I mean it's like in a certain sense, it's a predecessor to the kinds of books that like conservatives have been writing once every few years, like pretty much since Buckley, right? About how college campuses are awful and they're infested with terrible leftists and all that, right? So in a certain sense, it was the first book in that series. But whereas a lot of those books position themselves rhetorically as pro-free speech, right? That's like, oh, the problem is that there's too much liberal conformity, right? There's no dissent allowed. Buckley just unabashedly positions himself as an enemy of like academic freedom, and he's like, no, Yale should fire all these people, right? Because they displease me. An
open mind is an open wound.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, I suppose like somebody like Chris Rufo is maybe coming full circle back to the original Buckley position, but yeah, and so he spends a lot of the time being like, look, Yale has all these like socialists and atheists on the faculty, and this is terrible, and we should fire them, right? He actually says that the alumni association should be put in charge of ideologically vetting the new hires, But in the course of making this, insane case, he spends a lot of time denouncing denouncing the like readings in the economics courses at Yale and the things that the professors wrote. And I've got to say, from what I can remember that book, I'm pretty sure he actually read that stuff before he denounced it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't know, we're gonna like the existence of somebody stepping up to play the Buckley Shapiro role is inevitable. I mean, it's like one of these things that it's like, all ecosystems are going to have, parasites and stuff like that, right? They all systems of entrenched inequality are going to have like, there's like little court, intellectuals and pundits and entertainers who exist to defend the system. No, there's no help for that, right? But it's like, I don't know. I just don't understand why ours have to be quite this dumb.
Ben, before we go, I'm going to present you to a plausible scenario, which is when you next teach. Do you teach Marx to undergraduates? I assume you do.
Sort of, but go on.
Okay. One or many of your students has, in essence, Googled what is Marx's labor theory of value, and then used the Google AI summary and pasted it into their document. So I'm going to give you a vision of the future, and I'm going to read out to you the 5 key aspects of Marx's labor theory of value as given by Google, and you can preemptively grade those papers. Obviously, the actual grade in that case would be 0.
Sure.
But imagining not so.
If it's not flagged as being AI, yes.
Yeah. The 5 key aspects of Marx's labor theory of value: socially necessary labor time. This concept refers to the average labor time needed to produce a commodity, factoring in average skill, intensity, and prevailing conditions of production.
So far, so good.
Value versus price. While the labor theory explains value, it doesn't deny that price is influenced by supply and demand or market factors. However, for Marx, value is the underlying foundation upon which prices are built.
So sorry. The first sentence was doesn't deny that price is influenced by those things.
It doesn't deny that price is influenced by supply and demand or market factors.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, so far, the AI is doing good.
Labor power as commodity. In capitalism, workers sell their labor power, in brackets, the ability to work, to capitalists for a wage. This labor power is itself a commodity.
So far, so good.
Surplus value and exploitation. Workers create more value than they receive in wages. This difference is the surplus value, which is appropriated by the capitalist, leading to exploitation.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't really actually explain how that happens, but it's not wrong, I guess.
Yeah, there's nothing so far that's been wrong. I think that like the first one of these you can even like fault for being like, because like just as like 1 or 2 sentence summaries, I mean, like so far it's been like, yeah, good job, right? The like this last one, it's like, okay.
It's a bit empty, but
it's not it's incomplete to an extent that might make it a little bit misleading, but like, I mean, that's being picky.
And finally, purpose of the theory. Marx used the theory to expose the inherent contradictions and antagonisms within capitalism, and to demonstrate how exploitation is built into the systems of production and exchange.
Sorry, I got to give me that one again.
Marx used the theory to expose the inherent contradictions and antagonisms within capitalism, and to demonstrate how exploitation is built into the system of production and exchange.
I mean, it's pretty vague, but I don't know that there's anything wrong there.
Yeah, I think it's pretty classic AI stuff where it hasn't fucked up. It normally is just on topic but vague.
Yeah, right. There are many points of view about blah blah blah, right? That's
yes.
yeah.
And the exploitation and the value in the production, the value in the exploitation.
Like the first 3 were actually pretty solid. I think the fourth was getting a little vague in a way that
which makes it really grim that the kind of reactionary popular critiques of Marx are catastrophically worse than the Google AI summary.
Oh my God, no, there's no comparison. I mean, this yeah, like yes, catastrophically worse, absolutely. First three are pretty good. Fourth is like a little vague in a way that might make it potentially misleading, because you might think it's like, okay, is that, we haven't really said what makes it exploitation exactly yet. The fifth is so vague that the fifth is like vague to the point that it doesn't really convey any information, but again, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if I were doing like, it's very unlikely that I would do like a regular university class where this would come up, right? But like, if I were doing a class where I was like grading homework and somebody submitted this and this was the length of what I asked them to do, and it wasn't flagged as AI, I'd be pretty happy about this. Like this is like, it's like, oh, it doesn't, I don't really see. It's like, yeah, I could tell at the end there when you got a little fuzzy about it, right? But
use the right words.
Yeah,
in the right order.
But it's like, yeah, I could tell at the end when you got a little fuzzy about that. You were like, you were going a little bit out beyond your skis, but it's like, for the most part, pretty good, right? It's like I can't really complain about that. So yeah, if I'm normally, I'm otherwise on record as being militantly opposed to, any sort of.
I think this is the first Google AI summary I've actually read in full.
Any sort of use of AI in write-in, but I think if we can automate away the production of Ben Shapiro books.
Right. I was going to say, all we need to do is teach the Google AI to have an annoying voice.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. I'm not. Oh no, I am going to ask. What are you writing next week? Even if it will not.
Yes, it will not be here because I will be gone, which is as good a time as any to say that. Well, in 6 days from now, next Saturday, I am going to be. I'm going to be at the Jacobin conference in New York. So Jacobin's doing a conference for the 15th anniversary of the magazine launching, and I'm going to be. So there's like Vivek Chibber is going to be the keynote. Cedric Johnson's going to be there. Lots of good people on that program. But I'll be on a panel about post-capitalist blueprints. So we're going to be arguing about where we should set the price of potatoes, and so that's happening next Saturday. And
Wait, I just realized, does Ben Shapiro thinks that the average price of one potato is between $2 to $3?
So many interesting questions you could ask here. But yeah, it's it's literally the Arrested Development thing, right?
Right.
Cost, Michael.
It has to be a huge potato.
Yeah. So yeah. In any case, so yeah, that's going on this coming Saturday, and this coming Friday, I'm going to be. So I will already be in New York for that. So we're doing a GTAA happy hour meet and greet thing at Bar Frida and FREDA, Bar Frida in Queens, which is part owned by our favorite petty capitalist proprietor, TJ, who is also the booking agent who set up the live shows that Jason and I have done before. So there's no cover, but do buy drinks if you're gonna be there. So that's at 6 p.m. this coming Friday, Bar Frida in Queens, for anybody who's in New York who's watching. And on the off chance that anybody is in Atlanta, I can't really say normally anymore. When we would theoretically be doing this, when you'll be doing this,
yes.
Next Sunday. I'm going to be on a plane. I have to go to Atlanta for incredibly depressing personal reasons. I have to go to memorial service, but
For Ryan Lake.
indeed, yep. But while I'm there, it looks like I'm going to do a talk for Atlanta DSA on a different day. So that is going to be on Monday the 15th at 7 p.m. I think is what we're talking about, on how Marxism can help us make sense of the world around us. And we're still trying to figure out a location. I mean, worst case scenario, can just do it in the DSA office, but trying to figure out if there's like a beer garden or something we can commandeer to do that in. So yes, all that is, again, if you're in New York or Atlanta, come to do one of those things that I just said. But the Substack for next week is going to have absolutely nothing to do with any of those subjects.
Is it part 2 of Liar's Paradox?
Exactly. Yep.
Which will not be the second Liar Paradox article on the Substack. I think it might be the third or fourth.
Yeah, I believe it'll be the third, but yeah, but yeah, that's I was actually kind of, when I did part 1, I was like, okay, in the Ryan Lake tribute, I'd mentioned that I'd written my dissertation on this these many years ago, and I'd had like a sort of super capsule version of what it was about. I was like, yeah, haven't written about this in a couple of years. Like, I should like expand on this, but I wanted to avoid retreading what I did last time, which is that when I wrote about this in 2023, I just wrote like this like monster of an essay, right? That's like that was I don't remember exactly how long it was, but in my memory at least it was very, very long, right? So I didn't want to do that, right? Like I was trying to do like, because if I was going to do that, I could just refer people to the one I'd already written anyway, right? So I wanted to do something like much shorter and punchier than that. So for the purposes of keeping each of them short and punchy, I did the first one as sort of just setting up what the philosophical debate is about this. And then here's what I think is going to wait for part 2. And I would have done part 2 for today, but honestly, when I saw the picture of this page from Shapiro's book, it's like, I kind of have to do that.
Next week, I am going to talk about how kind of the digital production of certain items, digital distribution mainly of certain items, has led to certain commodities that were once immense luxuries, like music and literature, or like almost on the edge. They're like completely prepared to be communalized within a socialized or communist economy. Though obviously there's still the limit. They're limited by existing on these commercialized platforms. It's a very easy step to move them forward, and discussing how in that context we shouldn't think about like, oh, how could anything possibly be communalized? How could any commodity be communalized? But say that we'll already basically have the preconditions for certain commodities to be communalized. And the question is instead how we universalize this process.
Nice. Yeah. I will definitely. Yeah, that actually sounds really cool. I will check that out. Probably not live unless my airplane has truly amazing onboard Wi-Fi, but or my flight is delayed. So one of the other. But I will definitely check that out. You guys should tune in and watch that next Sunday.
Cool. I'm going to set the outro video. Cartoons. Bye.